Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the GLL Apex Legends series. We've seen the first half of the competition for EMEA. The second half of that will continue tomorrow. With the clock striking almost 1 AM here in Stockholm, Sweden, it means it's time to move things over to America. My name is Parla and I am your desk host, and I'm joined on the desk still by Glitter, but this time we've swapped out on set for Bravo, one of our casters, but who is, of course, a more than capable analyst as well. Guys, great to have you back.
Good to be joining you guys. I mean, you guys crushed it breaking down kind of Europe. It was exciting to see a lot of newness. Of course, no shortage of things to talk about, but I'm happy up here with you for the first half of North America.
No, you're being too kind. I am honestly, this felt like the longest break because I have been anxiously awaiting watching these NA teams get into some good games.
Myself also, Glitter, and with these two on the desk, that means on the casting desk we have Onset and Dreadnought. Guys,
hello.
How's it going?
They've moved me along onto the casting desk, and it's the first time we've casted together. I'm excited, man. I get to cast some North American teams. We've seen the EMEA region having a lot of fun and also giving us a lot of excitement as viewers. And yeah, hopefully North American can reproduce something quite as exciting for us.
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to North America, mainly because of World's Edge and the impact that does on the playstyle. When mixed with North America, what does that look like? The aggression when having those bottlenecks on the map, how does that kind of play into things? It's going to be very exciting. Yeah,
we saw so many tight finishes, guys, and I'm expecting to see the same action from NA, especially considering that I've been told that there's going to be some aggressive action coming out from that side of the pond.
I mean, I'd like to think that there's going to be. I think that a lot of the teams in EMEA surprised us with meta and some rotation choices and how early some teams were taking the zone versus how, LG was really pushing on the outside of the ring. I'm hoping to see NA get into a little bit more hectic action, just maybe a little bit earlier on too.
Certainly, yeah. I think also it brings up some topics about, right, maybe the drops aren't as straightforward. Maybe we don't have so many gentlemen's agreements at play. I think BCJ also was kind of taking to Twitter and saying teams are going to play different with money on the line. You guys talked about it on the desk during Europe as well, so we might even see a little bit more early engagements because we certainly saw that in Poland, but we did not see that in the first 6 matches of Europe.
Yeah. That is something that I would love to see because it does throw a bit of extra craziness into the mix. How likely is it, though, Glitter?
Well, we do have teams the likes of Lazarus who are kind of known for being that disruptive presence in the game. They are a very aggressive team and with an aggressive play style, and if they decide that this event is right for that, then it could really throw off a lot of other teams.
Yeah, and keep in mind also being the first tournament on this map, being an online tournament, things of that nature, we could see some things that we might not necessarily see on LAN, which is kind of exciting, right? I think that could certainly lead to some non-traditional action, some early starts like that.
I agree. Let's get the schedule up on screen for all of you at home so you can see what to expect over the rest of the night. We're starting off with our first match now at 1 AM. And we'll have 6 matches overall tonight and then have the second 6 tomorrow. We'll finish things off at 4:20, but we are on a slightly accelerated schedule. So if things finish earlier, those might get pushed back. But either way, I'm expecting you to stay locked in and enjoy the whole show. I've definitely been enjoying being here so far, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the action transpire on the North American side of things. Now, talking about the point system and prize pool, again, if you are not already aware, you get 12 points for finishing in first place, and then it descends down to 0 if you finish between 16th and 20th. And of course, you get 1 point, a single point per kill. The prize pool for each region is $25,000, and so that means if you finish in first place in your region, you score yourself 10 grand. For those of you that don't understand English slang, that's $10,000. Guys, attending teams for NA on screen now, of course, 20 teams per region. We can see some heavyweights of esports just as we saw on the European side of things too, and then some maybe mixed teams, lesser known squads. Guys, who stands out?
You want to go first?
I mean, yeah, how much time do we have before the first match? There's quite a few names that we certainly have our eyes on that we've been talking about for the weeks leading up to this event. Off the top of my head, I think that the two that you would be mistaken in not talking about are TSM and Sentinels, but that just scratches the surface. Glitter, I know you've got some of your favorites as well, of course, that you're going to be keeping an eye on.
I mean, not obviously, I think everyone's expecting a lot out of TSM considering they're undefeated back-to-back champions. But there are a lot of really good qualified teams for the NA bracket that I'm really excited about. I would like to see what the Youngins and Frex's team can actually bring to the table. They outclassed points-wise a lot of the people in their qualification bracket, as well as T1 and Young Guns.
Yep, I think, yeah, and even more that we're going to luckily have a chance to dive into that we could see kind of upsetting North American bracket a bit. The one thing I'm really curious about is we saw in Europe, and Dread pointed out really great, huge disparity between the top 4 and the rest of the table, doubling that of a lot of the teams that were in the bottom 10. Is North America going to be tighter? And I think we're only, we're going to have to get into the games to find out.
Yeah, this is GLL's inaugural Apex Legends events. It's mine also. And in the lead up to it, luckily, there was a gentleman on Twitter, if I could remember his at, I'd shout it out, but he tagged us all, I think, in an article which had a bunch of awesome details, and TSM was one of the main teams that he was talking about as a very strong force on the NA side of things. Bravo, could you tell me a bit more about this team?
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you look at the talent on the team, they're a threat in a bunch of ways. One, they're so mechanically skilled, and anyone who watches their streams or has watched them in tournaments knows just how mechanically skilled they are. Also, they're just fiercely consistent, right? They did not win Poland in a landslide, right? There were other teams that were on match point when they won their games, but when it comes down to it, they're able to clutch up, and as a result, they're back-to-back champions. As Onset talked about earlier, we would be talking about a different team if they didn't step up and win back-to-back tournaments. So I think those are kind of two of the reasons that we're going to continue to see them on the table, and in talking to other pro players, they're constantly winning scrims as well, so they're kind of picking up where they left off.
I think part of it, too, that can maybe play a little bit of a role is that the fact that they keep winning, there has to be a little bit of added pressure there for them. But this is also a little bit different in the sense that it's a new map, new legends, and they do have a certain level of confidence about themselves considering how well they've done thus far. There is a possibility of maybe taking too many risks because of that, Yeah.
And maybe here, like we said, right, just online tournament, first tournament on this map, kicking off the GLL series, maybe they take too many risks at this event.
Yeah, I mean, we see that across esports, right? Sometimes there can be a team that becomes a very dominant force, and whilst then they'll see many victories in a row, it gives a chance for other teams to potentially adapt and start coming up with new strategies. And talking about that, are there any teams in the mix in the NA side of things that we can maybe expect some surprises from or underdogs, so to speak, that have a chance of having a good performance here?
Yeah, I think we've got a few to talk about. I think Glitter kind of hit the nail on the head that there are definitely a few teams, specifically the qualified, that we're going to be looking out for.
Yeah, I definitely am looking out for Pittsburgh Storm. They have managed to combine 2 rosters from Poland.
Pittsburgh Knights and ex-Tempo Storm,
exactly,
right? Together.
Exactly, which is why the name is very fitting, right? But they have a lot of talent on that roster that I think can sometimes maybe be a little undersold. And so I'm thinking that they can really do something good here this weekend.
And keep in mind also their Poland performances, respectively, 29th for Pittsburgh, 42nd for Tempo Storm. I think most would agree do not represent their skill level and where they really sit. So they're going to be looking to this is their first chance to make a statement since mid-September, and they're going to want to do it here.
One of our main talking points when we were covering EMEA was if we'd see some not so common legend compositions, and then luckily Virtus Pro and a couple of the other teams were putting some different strategies on the table. Glitter and Bravo, do you think we'll see that in NA as well, or are we going to expect the usual 3 legend composition?
I think we're definitely going to see a little bit of a change in the rosters. I just don't think it's going to be as extreme in NA as it is in the EMEA bracket. I don't know why. I think that it doesn't really make sense because I guess you can argue that maybe EMEA was a little bit more conservative with their playstyle, but way more wild with their changing up of the meta. I think it might flip a little bit on its head for NA.
Yeah, I think so. I'm hoping that we see some crazy stuff. I was curious to hear what you thought, but I agree. I think NA as a rule is going to be a little more traditional in meta, and we're going to see them W-keying a little bit more in gameplay.
First big tournament on the latest map as well. How do you think the NA guys will have been adjusted to it by now?
I hope they're ready.
They better be.
They've got a lot of them have reputations.
Crossed, right?
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting that we saw is a lot of the way that we saw the circles falling in Europe are circles that anyone who watched a fair bit of scrims will have been ready for. When the December 3rd update came out, you saw a lot of players taking to Twitter. They were not ready for a lot of end circles. We still see comments about the end circles. So the question is here, how do teams play in North America? Are they ready for them? Do they set up in a way that lets them kind of pivot and get into different end circles that they might have been ready for? So I think, just to circle back to the point, they have to be ready for it, and we'll see today if they are.
Just about 4 or 5 minutes to go before we get the NA side of the competition underway. And another point that I'd like to touch upon and get you guys' thoughts and opinions on is who should we be looking for in terms of star performances? We know games like this, they're definitely team-based, but there are going to be people pulling extra weight, showing off some amazing skills. Anybody standing out to yourselves, Glitter and Bravo?
You want to start?
I mean, I feel like we can always expect some insane gameplay out of any of the individual players on TSM.
Yeah.
However, Hal has been able to have a couple clutch plays, specifically the one that, won them, Poland.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be surprised if any of all three of them do something really, really good this weekend. But I think that I'm not going to call them out yet. I'm not going to cast or curse it. I have someone in my head that we can bring it back to after maybe like game 1 or 2. But I don't want to start it off rough.
I need to be careful that I don't mention. I think I know who you're going to mention.
Guys, jinxing doesn't exist, all right? Superstition. So Bravo, just say it.
All right,
say the name.
I think I know who you're going to mention, and I'm not going to mention him. However, there's a chance that the second person I'm thinking about mentioning actually is that player.
It's okay.
But guys, if you say it and then it ends up being right, whoa, I mean, you look like such a sick analyst.
One player that I think we know is capable of some great plays, not just flashy plays, but also strategically, is Monsoon. MIO.
Oh, yes.
That was on my list, but...
Right, but he's not the one I shouldn't have mentioned.
No, but it's... great
Good.
choice, though.
Yes, Monsoon, I think, is kind of a player who made a lot of noise with some really flashy sniping plays before Poland, and then that was the story coming into Poland, and guess what? Poland shows up and continues sniping. So definitely expecting some great things from Monsoon. And I think also curious to see what we're going to see out of the Rogue Boys, because I think 3 players that are super talented, super capable. If we take a look where they got in Poland, 10th place, right? It's impressive on the top side of the lobby, but you know that as players, they want to be much higher. So I'm expecting big things from them.
They also were one of the only teams that had back-to-back wins coming out of losers bracket. So.
Right. We saw them win. That's a great point. Well, I think a big story from the latter half of Poland was Rogue winning games, right? And we looked at teams that are capable of winning games. You look at a team even like Luminosity now, right? We've only seen them win a small handful of games. So when we talk, there's 2 different things, right? There's a team that's very good at this game, and then there's a team that is capable of winning games, and those are 2 different stories.
Yeah, it's a good topic to touch upon because, there's an incentive to get frags, to get kills. You get that 1 point per kill. And so you always have to balance trying to place as high as possible whilst at the same time finding those opportunities to frag, right?
Do you know what I'm actually excited for in relation to that is Team Liquid White. They specifically were very open about talking about the fact that this is a last-minute roster change that they're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And because of that, they're willing to kind of change up their play style and maybe just really go for those frags, go for those kills, which could make the game very interesting.
Okay, how do you think that could potentially play out if they're really going for an aggressive strategy that's focused on getting kills?
It could do a few things. The first thing it could do is it could upset teams in the game. I think especially if a team really feels confident in their drop and they feel good about their rotations, and all of a sudden they have a Liquid White kind of dropping on them or really early rotating on them. It could definitely ruffle some feathers, and we know that teams are kind of territorial and protective of these drops. So curious to see exactly if that will be the case, yeah.
Hot drops, that's what I'm looking for. I mean, if we're going for the full BM play, I want to see people jumping on each other from the start. I mean, we touched upon how the relationships between the different teams, like how close are all of these NA guys with each other? Do you like, and could that potentially lead into some of these situations we've been talking about?
You know the players better than most.
I mean, to be fair, they're all very close. A lot of them come from, various esports backgrounds prior to this game where they've all played together in other BR titles. But at the same time, they're obviously all insanely competitive. So I think first day, first round of 6 games, right? Everyone's going to be conservative and smart, kind of feel it out. For all we know, drops might be getting changed up a little bit, whether that's based off of the new changes to the map or some roster changes or just general play style being changed last minute because of maybe even what they saw in just our previous 6 games with EMEA. That might even inform their play style moving forward today. So, I mean, we'll be okay for like the first couple games, I think, and then once things get rolling, who knows?
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you think there is much of a difference between our qualified teams and our invited teams, perhaps in terms of skill, experience, any factors like that?
Short answer, absolutely. I think there's definitely a difference, and I think there's definitely a disparity. When you think about teams like, if you just look at kind of the placings overall for how the invited side did versus the qualified teams, just to highlight a few, we're talking about TSM, of course, in first place. We're talking about Rogue in 10th, right? We're talking about Sentinels in 6th at Poland. So there are big tournament stage finishes from that side, and I think also consistency in other games from a lot of them as well. However, as Glitter brought up earlier, there are teams in qualified, I think, especially Pittsburgh Storm being the premier example, that we could expect to shake up the top 3. Absolutely.
I think it's also important to note that a lot of the teams that are in the qualified portion of the bracket either are a majority roster or even just one player of people that did participate in Poland. They might not have had the strongest showing at the event, but they have the LAN experience, they have the competitive experience, and those changes that they've made to those rosters could be that one last piece of the puzzle that they needed to really kind of push that roster up into a top, 5 group.
I mean, both of you have played video games to a very high level, if not a professional level. For those players in there right now that maybe haven't had that same taste of that experience, is it going to be nerve-wracking? Are that some of those feelings going to creep in? Negative feelings, perhaps?
Short answer, once again, yes. I think one thing that is a little bit on their side is that these players are playing, from their setup.
Yeah,
they're at home.
That's true.
And they are playing the way that they play day in, day out, scrims. If they stream, essentially they're sitting at the desk they're comfortable at. I think you'd see that just magnified if we were on a LAN stage, and we have seen that magnified. But however, I think for the players that don't have a ton of experience, this is a pretty darn good way to get themselves into just simply more tournament under their belt. But when they get to a LAN, it's often hands are shaking even a little bit more.
Oh, yeah. This is probably the safest way to kind of get your feet wet a little bit, because I don't think there's many opportunities where you can play at this level from, like, your bedroom.
Yeah, it's the it's the in-between, right? Between a full-blown LAN where you physically have to go somewhere and then playing a competition that's not as important. This is like a big competition, but you can play it from home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to say, and when we were growing up, these prize pools are the prize pools we traveled across the world for, right? Yeah. When we were growing up, you could not sit in your bedroom and play for a $50,000 total prize pool.
That would be pretty sick.
Yeah, that wasn't really a thing, and now it is. So I think we all grew up maybe at the wrong time, but that's neither here nor there. And these players have a pretty darn good chance at taking home some cash today, which is exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the EMEA side of the competition, we only saw one repeat winner, and that was Luminosity Gaming. Do you think there's a good chance for some of the heavyweights on the NA side for any of them to get a repeat victory today?
Yeah.
Yep.
I definitely think that there are. Okay.
Well, we know Rogue's done it, first of all.
Right. Rogue's done it. TSM has had multiple wins in a tournament.
Sure, yeah.
Who else? Sentinels?
Yep.
Have done it before. So, like, there are teams that have experience doing that. And if anything, in this specific setting, they should most definitely be able to pull something out. Obviously, there's all the factors we've been talking about all day so far, with a ton of changes that they have to adapt to relatively recently. But the things that don't change in a BR are your decision making, your ability to follow your IGL. When they tell you what to do, you just do it, because that indecision that we've seen on some teams can really hinder you in very hectic moments when you have a split decision to make, the push or not. And those things are really going to be what mold those players and keep them being successful.
Bravo, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's going to come down, I think most importantly, as Glitter was highlighting, to consistency. So even teams that don't win a single game this whole weekend, right, can take home this tournament. Just simply getting the right points on the board and consistently playing time and time again. You look at a team, right, as we saw last round, like Kick, after 4 games leading.
Wizen too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think these teams can come out of nowhere. 6 games today, while it's going to go fast, it's a good bulk of games. And I think most would argue that in 6 games in this kind of format, you do start to see trends emerge.
Yeah.
And it's a long enough time where if you play consistently, at the end of the day today, you should be sitting pretty darn good in the table.
I mean, you've just described what we saw with EMEA, that by the end of it, it was a few of the teams that showed the most consistency and thus were at the top of the leaderboard. Would you say that's correct, Glitter?
Absolutely. And then I really hope that they are appreciating the weight as far as value goes on the kills. Like, I know everybody wants to play safe and play smart, and they have to, and they will for, early to mid-game. But we saw in a bunch of situations a second or third place team ended up getting first overall for that game because of how many kills they were able to pull out before they were fully down.
Yeah, that was Luminosity over Kick, if I remember correctly. And yeah, we should maybe expand a bit upon that because... I think the average maybe winning score for EMEA was just around 2021. By the end of it, Luminosity were at about 75 points or 73.
Yeah.
And so for North America, do you expect to see similar average numbers? Or do you think there's going to be a massive game where like 10 plus kills, 12 kills, really bolsters someone into that first place position, including the placement points?
Yeah, I think you could see, I think the obvious favorites would be a TSM and a Sentinels if they're playing really aggressive, could have bigger swing games. And I think simply, you guys highlighted on the desk earlier, if we see something like Europe playing slower and kind of playing just simply early rotates, try to get in and not a lot of early aggression, it almost makes it impossible in a way to have those big swings where you have games that are 10 plus kills. In NA, we could see something different.
See, the thing is, though, even referencing back to Poland, while teams like the TSMs and the Sentinels are the obvious picks, if there were a few games in Poland where we watched teams like FlyQuest had one very, very aggressive game that went incredibly well for them at Poland. So did Secret. And then at the time, there was a game where we watched Misfits take down the highest overall score for the entire weekend. And we have all of those players in this bracket as well.
Yep.
So there's a lot of potential for teams that are not the two people, the teams that everyone wants to talk about, to easily come out of nowhere and just absolutely dominate.
Thank you very much, Glitter and Bravo, for your ideas and input. Everybody, our players are locked and loaded, ready to go, which means we on the desk are done, and we can head on over to our casters, Dreadnought and Onset.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you very much. And yeah, looking forward to getting the North American region underway. As I said previously, very excited to be cast in alongside you, Dreadnought. And it's an opportunity for us to talk about some of the teams that we're going to have involved that haven't been talked about on the desk. And I wanted to get your feelings on some of these teams outside of that top 2 that we've been talking about. We should also note NRG won't be competing in this tournament. They've been replaced by HBL, so that's going to be open as well, just to quickly highlight that. But you had a few thoughts on who you think are going to be those teams who are really going to be looking to upset that top 2.
Well, okay, so I think I should reword it. I don't know if I think I'm confident they'll upset it, but I do think that they are a great study point on understanding. If you watch me commentate any part of Apex, you realize I pay attention to what I think are true win conditions. Like, what are the things that actually give you an advantage? And with so many variables, like in Apex Legends, it's hard to find those. And so... looking at World's Edge, we've been talking about the chokes, and to be honest, they didn't come to light very often within Europe. So the teams that I think have the most European play style, and seeing how that overlaps with like North America, has got to be Fnatic NA, and then also Complexity. These two teams are very macro-oriented. They're rotationally focused, which is what we talked about hypothesizing towards World's Edge, right? So what happens in terms of, yes, it won't be the same shooters and maybe not the same skill, but what happens when we get that rotational focus that we've seen out of EU with the aggression of North America on World's Edge? Do those chokes become a major problem for a lot of teams? Because, again, not everybody's worried about that rotation in the circle.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point, and it was maybe something we didn't see highlighted a lot in our EMEA region, was how deadly those choke points can be. And something that we were talking about just before it was thrown over to us is I expect North American teams to take advantage of those choke points more and see them as real kill zones to rack up points as they move towards end circle.
Yeah, I think, EMEA looked at it as a molehill, and North America's ready to make the mountain that they're going to die in. This is the hill that they are prepared to just go, this is it, and we're going to survive, and if we failed to do so, whatever that squad is, hopefully they're the one who gets the banner, because at least that way we can feel better about ourselves. I do think that they're going to be far more comfortable with taking that. This is the beginning of the end, or the beginning of greatness, right, for North America, and I think that caters to that, again, that kind of a bit of the aggression, but also I think the desire to just be stand out within those performances that NA players seem to have.
And I want to sort of talk about composition of Legends as well and teams, because EMEA threw up some real surprises and questions for us. And all of a sudden, we were thinking at the start, I was going, come on, man, you need a Wraith. Like, everybody knows like what they can achieve. But the more that it kind of rolled over in our heads, the more that we were discussing it off camera, we were like, wait, this is actually map specific. This is not Kings Canyon we're playing on here. This is World's Edge, and there is a real opportunity for Gibraltar. Like, we've seen a lot of him, and we were kind of half expecting to see Gibraltar, but the likes of Caustic coming into effect, the ability to control those open spaces and end circles. Europe seemed to have a different thought of how they want to do it, and it seems to be very effective.
I very much agree, and it's what elements of that come to light in North America? Do we see something? First of all, do we see anybody even risk Wraithless? Because that seems so not North America. Because Wraith is so good at getting in your face, risking the "am I better than you?" And if the answer is no, having the Q to be able to go into the void and escape from that situation. So she kind of caters to the mentality that I think North American players like to have. So will we see anybody go into the Wraithless route, or do we see even another level of creativity with the same thought process to deal with a lack of, right? I think the one character that shows up in North America more than EMEA is Bangalore in North America. Now, I don't think it's likely. I don't think I'd bet on it, but I could see a team be willing to use that, maybe even in replace of that Wraith, to deal with the mid-game problem that Wraith can, but also maybe having that ultimate for the late game fight and being able to threat on that final circle.
Yeah, it was certainly a surprise and very interesting for us to watch the likes of VP going Wraithless, and it was, you sort of saw the pros and the cons in 2 games back to back. For example, the game that they had a fantastic run in and they got to the end circles, and it was like, oh, this is great, this is really working. But then you saw a couple of times the first game actually where they were caught not being able to rotate into the circle. They had to zip across, they fall because they don't have that ability to pull to win. It also hurt them in the third game that we saw when they tried to move from Geyser up towards the little choke point up there as well, and trying to rotate out. They lost 1 player. So you kind of saw the positives and the negatives of it. I wanted to get like your overall thought. Ongoing Wraithless, which is now what we're calling it officially.
So we're just waiting on 2 players to get in the lobby, and then we're ready to kick this thing off. But what it is okay, so all gaming, and generally speaking, and it's so hard to view it like this within Apex, and that's probably why you see me harp on such weird elements of the game, is it all comes down to what is the most forgiving. Because those that are the most forgiving and give you the most amount of options and the most amount of circumstances make you the least predictable and likely to basically choose your own destiny, right? And so I think it's all about the forgiveness factor of the Wraith, and that comes down to the mid-game problem. We know the advantages and disadvantages that hit in the late game, but I think it's basically, do you find yourself in a situation where those mid to mid-late game rotations are heavily crippled due to the Wraith, and that's not something that's in your control. So my first instinct is, no, don't risk that, right? Because given enough sample size, there are going to be games that are directly against you, and anything that sets you behind because of a choice you volunteered into is already a misplay in the first place. So though I absolutely adore the thought process, and I'm on your thought process as well, there may be a world where that actually is viable. Currently, I'm still struggling to go, Wraithless is the way to go.
I would completely agree. And, we're talking about those macro factors that factor into a team's performance across a game, but I want to talk about the most obvious thing, which is the reason that a lot of people use Wraith is that ability to stay alive in an end circle, to outlive your opponents. I feel it's a real hindrance to a team to take that, that ability to outlast your opponents by just going into the void and dropping that portal down. Like, why would you ever surrender what is potentially a game-winning mechanic for the ability to either pick up kills or control open ground?
Yeah, and I think it, as you kind of talked about a little bit before, it got exaggerated colossally more on Kings Canyon because of I would argue some of the severe elevation differences that you could get at specific moments would make the Wraith have the high ground descending into the middle, suddenly make the portal play over that final circle really, really confusing, because they're going to enter with grenades first, then they're going to go in, and they're going to have the most amount of time. Whereas, again, with what we've seen, without that massive elevation difference, that Wraith isn't getting that value as consistently as possible. And I do think that though there is still a lot of value for that end game Wraith, it's just not always going to be successful. The same way the mid game is equally as questionable out of your control for the Wraith, the end game I think also still projects that. And it's all due to World's Edge. I mean, when I say same patch, shift this back to King Canyon, I go, you cannot go without Wraith.
Oh, 100%. I think we saw maybe the downside of the Wraith in endgame with one of those open circles that we had across the top of, it was actually Skyhook where we had Kick who won that game, and that was because G2 had to portal into that circle and it just became a visual aid for Kick to hold down. Everyone was just focus fire as soon as they moved through, and it was like their only way to move. However, it became a hindrance, which the Wraith portal has not been known for, especially in those end circles.
Yeah, and we've never really seen, like a couple of moments we've seen teams try and take the opportunity to use like a zipline as a sense of distraction and deceit, right? But never has that Wraith portal really been that. And I think it's understandably so, but all I'm trying to highlight is basically when you do that portal, there is no like, what if we didn't take it, right? Like what if that was the bait? Because the amount of time to gain the value out of it in the first place is so far apart that whatever rotation you're going to make to, bamboozle the opponent is near non-existent.
Well, let's talk about some of the qualified teams. We've talked about some of the big dogs here. And, everyone knows about your TSM and, all the teams like that. Let's talk about some of these teams who have been fighting through in the kill race to get to where they are now. And there's one team in particular that I want to kind of focus on that there's been a lot of positive talk about, and that is the Youngins and Frex. Now, Frex we know about. We've seen him before. We've seen him performance. But the two teammates that are going alongside him are hearing a lot of good things about their individual skill. That is, of course, Nathan and Rocket. What do you know about these guys? Are you excited to watch these guys play?
I am excited for the roster to be able to play, mainly based on the fact that when we look at their performance coming into this, 841 points.
That's a lot of points.
When it came to the kills, next place was 773, and it is a massive gap. They have by far the highest performance when looking at the qualifiers itself. This is where I want to bring it back to, the NRG conversation and the history of them as a team when looking at their rise to success or maybe the lack thereof, depending on who you are as a fan, right? And that comes down to when kill races were the highest priority, they were nearly unstoppable. They're having some of the greatest track record possible. The second we got on the same server, wasn't able to hold up. So when I hear about Frex and the like, I think that they have the great potential, but I've seen what happens when you are great at kill races and you can't make that translate otherwise. And it just feels like that's inevitable. That being said, I'm ready to be proven wrong, and I hope that they have the cohesion to really step it up.
Yeah, I think if we look back on the EMEA, there was one team in particular, Alliance, who managed to pick up that win. That showed that they could transfer over to, the Battle Royale position and playing instead of kill race, playing for that placement, playing for those kills. But enough about that. It's time to get into our first game here, Dreadnought. 6 games we're going to be bringing you today from the North American region. We're going to be jumping on board with Hodsick, Soulful, and of course the man at the bottom there, Decop.
It is Pittsburgh Storm here. Again, the hybrid between the Pittsburgh Knights. They're Hodsick being the original member of that, and then Soulful and Decop. And I find it even more interesting to watch this team's performance, not only because the hype or being one of the prime teams coming out of the non-invited teams, the qualified teams, but it's the fact that Temple Storm, even when looking at just their isolated performances, back at X Games, they had Monsoon on their roster.
Yes,
it's just a fill-in. We haven't even gotten to see what actual Temple was supposed to look like. So then we took in, maybe the best of both worlds, hybrided together, and here we are watching them with, a bold geyser drop.
Yes, it's an interesting drop for them, and they're going to be pretty much uncontested here. I'm going to see them rotating through as quickly as possible. And I want to talk about kind of the IGL situation here, because you've got kind of two players on that team who like to call the shots a little bit in very different styles. You have a called Hodsick, who's kind of more relaxed kind of guy, but then you have Decop, who likes to bring that energy, bring that hype to the team. Do you see those two potentially clashing as we move forward?
What if I told you that balance might be necessary? And that is the element that I think a lot of people kind of overlook is, well, doesn't that clash in the game in the moment? And I can tell you, if you were to ask, when I was an in-game leader at the professional level, what side of that spectrum would I be? I am Decop. I am in your face. I am loud. I am telling you what we are doing. I'm letting you go. But I can tell you those decisions wouldn't have been made as effectively if somebody else isn't telling me why it's a bad idea. Now, granted, a certain level of doubt is healthy. Too much can be equally as problematic, but I do have an element that makes me wonder, is that going to be a benefit for that roster more than it is going to be a problem?
Well, this is the Youngins and the Frex that we're watching at the moment. You can see they're dropping by the tree and just getting themselves all lit up, and it's always interesting to see, as we mentioned, we have that drop open that we were expecting NRG to be filling. That's going to be Lava City. It'd be interesting to see who's taking control of that and be able to loot up without pretty much any contention, or if there's going to be more than one team who are thinking about doing the same thing.
Yeah, it seems like it was a bit of a hot topic once the news let out there over the fact that Lava City may be a vacant territory. But the fact that we do see the tree, I actually don't believe out of all of EMEA, we even got a glance at this part of the map. So not surprising, though, to see it just be a bit of a slower start. I feel like it's more about where do they have to rotate due to those circles here. Now taking a glance over, which is going to be Sorcerer BCJ in the squad, sitting on just the outskirts of what is just to the west of Dome here. Got a pretty good loadout. Longbow R99, maybe a couple attachments to be desired, but not too shabby.
It looks like that circle is going to be pulling north at the moment as we jump on board with Fnatic as well. We have Muffins, we have Shiny, we have Spirit, and they were one of those teams that we were expecting a lot of back in Poland. Maybe didn't rise to the levels they were expecting. Maybe in some circumstances on the Saturday, we were saying that the EU Fnatic roster was actually outplaying them as far as Fnatic as a banner was concerned. And they've got a little bit to prove, in my opinion. They like to rotate early, they like to get set up, and I'm interested to see if that playstyle is going to work nicely for them here.
I agree. And another roster with equal level amounts to prove, but for very different reasons in different ways here, is that of TSM. Looking for what is going to be, in theory, you know, the three-peat coming out from them. And also, keep in mind here, the fact that we have Alberlele off of the Pathfinder, moving on to the Gibraltar himself, and then we got Hal now transitioning over to the Pathfinder.
Yeah, that's always an interesting thing to see Hal moving over to the Pathfinder reps. Dropping that Watson that we're so used to him seeing. So interesting to see even TSM here changing things up.
Yeah.
We're so used to seeing some consistency from them. But they're going to be pretty happy with the fact that, you know, it looks like the circle's pulling their way. It could be finishing around what I like to call the toll booth, which is that tiny choke point between Capital City, the tower, the drill tower, and between where they're dropping their fuel depot. The issue here for TSM, though, you're looking at that loot, you're looking at that shield. They're not going to be too happy with their things up there.
No, they've got to find more to be able to defend that territory and not have to pay the toll themselves. Making a transition out here, though, is in fact the roster we were talking about, with Frex the most dominant team out of the qualifiers, and actually making a transition that's going to be able to avoid the roster of TSM for now. Whether or not they know it or not, probably going to be a smarter choice. Interesting shadow. He saw him look up to try and see what that was. I have no idea what that was.
Yeah, just wondering if anyone was disappearing from that balloon, and you can see those players now dropping in just in front of them on this settlement just to the north of Sorting Factory, and it's going to be interesting to see if they get into an engagement there or if they're just going to allow that team to rotate ahead of them and just play a little bit later game or look to play a little bit later game. But now on board with Secret as they move through Capital City, and it's going to be Fnatic who are also set up here, and Fnatic doing what they do best here as we now jump on board with Sentinels. As we mentioned, Fnatic just setting up early, getting that early rotation that brings them so much success.
Yeah, and we've been talking a little bit about the North American playstyle. If you want an embodiment of it, it's Sentinels, right? Yeah. It is the W in your face. This roster has been some of the most aggressive, both, I think, in-game and off-game, if you will, or out-of-game, if you will, here. Very much confident in their playstyle, and I'm excited to see what they have here. These guys are some of the more threatening that we have ever seen when it comes to the kills, but I don't know if they're going to have what it takes, again, with what I expect to be a pacing problem of World's Edge for the North American teams.
Well, you can see they've got that kind of classic composition that we saw a lot back on Kings Canyon. They have the Pathfinder, they have the Wraith, and of course, they have the Watson as well to work things together. And now we're going to see a first look at that brand new heirloom as well. Pathfinder, he's ready to throw hands.
Yeah, take my money, Respawn. I get it. Why'd you... Oh, man, I needed Pathfinder to come out a little bit later, you know? At least after some kind of paycheck, because my goodness. But anyways, one thing I do want to bring up really quickly before things get a little bit too wild is some of the weaponry. I think it's a little bit too early to hold, like, we're coming up with conclusions, but there are a couple of weapons. For instance, the Wingman has been showing up so far a little bit more, and the 301, actually. A little bit less scout priority, too, as well, out of Europe, but that was something we had heard a bit in rumors.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see, you know, how different regions just play the game differently, how they view the game differently, how they see the game panning out differently, just from a geographic and who they get to play against. But you can see Rise here, they're set up inside Capital City as well, as we are seeing, as we mentioned previously, a pretty central circle moving, which is going to include a lot of teams you can see with this early rotation into Capital. But the excitement in Capital City when we see this circle is as soon as it pulls away from one of those buildings, we have to see those transitions from building to building.
Yeah.
And like we saw earlier, sometimes it can just pull out into that open space and then we have a ruckus on our hands.
Yeah, it gets real wild real fast there. And on the note of, again, of the weaponry, like, look at this. An EVA 8 pickup and swap even over from the longbow, which again is very different. And the longbow is actually peaked up here and there at moments where it was near completely a miss out of all of EMEA, even over 6-game span. Another major trend difference, granted this is only game number 1, we just concluded round 1 and we're already down a squad.
Yeah.
That did not happen in Europe. We got to the point of, I think, round 3, 4 before we ended up losing one squad completely here. So a bit more bold here, whether that be poor decision-making on rotations or, again, pressing W and running it down.
So we are going to see that Wraith Portal going to be allowing the rest of his team to move up here to that building again in Capital City. You can see we jump on board with T1 here and Zerg playing that Pathfinder and just holding down, I think it's the 2nd floor.
Yeah, they have a lot of loot, too, when looking, you know, just at some of the, having a digital threat with an extended mag of any kind on the Wingman, good baseline there. Peacekeeper as well. The fact that everybody's looted up in 18 cells, I mean, you know, right now, this is a good posturing for T1. It really just comes down to what did we see in rounds 2, 3, right?
And going back to that weaponry that we were talking about before, this is where you are going to start to see players maybe swap out some of those longer range weapons for those shorter range weapons. It's obvious to say why, but as that circle closes, there's no need for those long range battles.
Yeah.
It's going to be more about those spray weapons, the R99, the Wingman is going to be obviously very useful still in that sort of medium range as well. But the Eva 8s, the Peacekeepers, that's where business really starts to pick up. And my personal favorite, of course, I love that anvil on that flatline. Oh, yeah. Boy, does it do damage.
No, it is. And both of them, it's insane. Even more so, definitely, when looking towards that flatline. But now here with Rise Nation once more, still holding up in Capital City. I have a feeling we're going to hit a stalemate here for a couple of minutes. I don't really think anybody's going to take the risk. We have seen, for the most part, the teams being focused on making their transition towards the center of the city, and understandably so. But one thing, again, bringing it towards, will North America be looking towards posturing that? Some of the teams are sitting on the outskirts of the city, whereas I think the general pattern out of EMEA would be more focused on getting on those buildings and all being on the same playing field. So we'll see how that unfolds when they're forced out. But we're still probably at least 3 minutes out from that.
It's kind of been a game of posture for the moment. Teams trying to find real estate and kind of take their time to make the decision on when they want to play, trying to spot out other teams and where they're rotating in. There's going to be actually more of a later rotation coming in here from the epicenter side of the map. That means they're going to have to move towards Capital with all of those teams and those buildings being vacated at the moment. It means that that rotation is going to be so much more difficult as they're coming under fire here anyway, before they even get into Capital City to contest one of those buildings.
Yeah, and look at the patience here being displayed by Casper, finding one. But that rotation there for that last team is going to be very risky, and we are starting to see some of these shots kind of raining in there from the western side of Capital City towards construction in the main structures. The question is, what does Team Liquid decide to do here? We do have Sentinels waiting in the wakes kind of off on the side, and it's important to note that great couple of shots there on that scout. But the biggest thing to highlight is the next couple of rotations aren't likely going to be in Capital City, right? These teams all have to make a maneuver out, and that's when Sentinels are going to just body that choke, I believe.
Oh, but Lou's going to be dropped here. He has shots coming in. It's going to be a scout who's going to drop him. He gets taken down almost immediately. His two teammates will survive, and it was Liquid there. That scout, we saw the damage that was being done with it onto another team, but turning the attentions there to Liquid means the one player will drop. And now we're starting to see a few more engagements, and Zerg's actually going to take down Abraleli there.
Yeah, and also at the same note, quickly here, before I'm sure we're going to translate over to another skirmish there as TSM get into the battle, but the fact that we do see Complexity is maintaining, they have the information over that next circle, and they are maintaining that early rotation decision-making. So we'll see if it works out, or if TSM and all the others here kind of sharking off on the side have something else to say about it.
Well, you can hear how on the team comms, but he's coming under fire as well, and they're just not letting TSM settle. You can see they're trying to get into position, find some cover, and then kind of have that communication, that conversation, like, what should we do here? Here's what we should do. But they're not even being allowed to settle and have that conversation before they're coming under fire. It's such a difficult position to find yourself in.
And it could be even more so when you consider the fact that once they get the knock onto Abraleli, they're on the Gibraltar, they know that's TSM. And I can't help but feel like if there's any game, or if there's any team in this game that you're going, we do not lose sight of them once you know where they are, it is TSM. So I think it's even more understandable that TSM is unlikely to be able to make it out of that transition due to teams like Team Liquid holding up the capital city. Big shot coming in onto Imperial How. At this point, if it's a Pathfinder on this roster, I just automatically go, it's got to be Albra, but we'll be able to get back and get this battery off.
So the battery's going to go off, and TSM survive to fight another day. And this is one of those situations where even with Abraleli being taken down, somehow, some way, TSM always find themselves in that scuffle towards the end game. So it's going to be fascinating to watch them and see how they maneuver, having even lost a player here and how they rotate. But you're looking at how many teams are set up around where they're trying to push at the moment. We have the Pittsburgh Storm here. They're set up and they're holding down anywhere that wants to push the top of this map. You also had Team Liquid, who are outside of that tunnel as well. So difficult rotations here, and with T1 also overlooking them as well, it's a tough time here for the guys on TSM to rotate.
It really is, and basically the two teams holding the fuel depot choke with that toll that you were talking about before on the ridge, I feel like we're looking at this next circle maintain a majority of the positional advantage, and Team Liquid kind of just off on the side from that. It'll be really interesting to see what unfolds here over this next circle. Again, with all the theories we've kind of had thrown around over what these chokes will enforce over North America.
I use my portal to get here. I can try to look for something free.
Well, this is the interesting thing. TSM have managed to at least rotate into Capital City. Yes, they are kind of open to grenades and shots down from above. The fact that Watson isn't going to be in play and being able to cause too much damage as far as getting that ult down and taking down any grenades, but we're seeing nice shots coming in here. But Liquid do lose a player here, so they've got to be aggressive on this team and try and take them down. The team trying to sneak up behind them. The wingman shots aren't going to hit too many. 47 damage done. 47 more damage, but they can't quite fill this kill, clean these kills up. Finally, they do move in here. The assassination is going to come in. the elimination will come in, the assist, everything you could possibly want in that battle means that they will finally win this battle and be able to get the res off.
Yeah, and that was very, very close for what seems like it should have been a very controlled initiation for Team Liquid. I think sloppy at best is how we would describe some of that for how confident it could have been there. Something that they're going to have to clean up as we are nearing the closing, the conclusion of the closing here of round 3.
I just want to look at this circle. Sorry to cut you off there, Drake, because it's starting to move away from Capital City. We're starting to look at that train track, and one position that I love to see teams hold down when we are seeing this end circle is just under that train track. If you can get an ult up there, a Watson ult, and you can get some fences up, you really can control the map because you have that aerial cover, which makes Gibraltar and his ult all the less effective if they're coming up against you.
Yeah, and the team that would be roughly closest to that positioning based on what we've seen should be Team Liquid, in the fact, I think it was Team Liquid Blue and Casper and friends in there, and the fact that they are sitting off towards that train entrance. Here we do take a glance at what was before a roster sitting on the backside of Sentinels here, but now Rogue controlling a skirmish here on the fuel depot. Got to make their way through, and again, Sentinels waiting in the side.
Yeah, the reason that I said it's the toll bridge is because you have to pay a price to get through, and you can see the price that Sweet Dreams is taking here.
Yeah,
got to push this team because otherwise they're just going to get stuck here. The circle's going to become an issue.
Yeah, it is very, very difficult for them to be able to deal with the situation here. They have a golden EVA 8 and an Art 99 with a golden stabilizer. I would look at that and automatically go, sweet, you're on a Rogue. You need to be the person who initiates this, sets the tone apart here, because we only have 1 minute and 15, not just to win this fight, but then deal with whoever is sitting at the actual toll. I think that's the biggest thing to look at is we're highlighting the toll as the thing sitting on the high ground, not the squad looking to get the battle here and already dropping down all of his shields. Going to have to get a battery off.
So we're going to see the re-engagement here. The gold EVA 8 is going to be pretty deadly up close and personal. Has that double tap on, of course, the standard, which means that shots are going to be deadly. And you can see it's CLG are the team who are trying to push them. And it looks like Rogue are going to be able to deal with the push in from CLG. Now they have to turn their attention as quickly as possible to that rotation. The team that is up on that tower, that drill tower, on that choke point, is the Youngins and the Frex. This is the team we're excited to see. What is their decision-making going to be like in this situation?
I mean, this is, if you had a moment that is, able to set yourself apart, improve yourself, I feel like this is very clearly going to be one. The gatekeeping here over that roster down below, you have 30 seconds before you know it's going to force their hand. This is an opportunity to really make a big play here for the roster. But for now, Frex here actually transitions through on that Wraith portal that's going to be set up, goes ahead and throws down his generator. And I wonder how much focus they're going to be setting in this direction, because I don't know if they necessarily are fully confident. It seems like they would have inevitably had to see that fight, but just based on the fact that not everybody is looking that direction with 7 seconds, shows to me they might not know.
I like the idea that I'm seeing here. I think what they're trying to do is split their resources. They're allowing Frex to play low and kind of set up their next rotation, whereas the two players are staying up top and just keeping an eye on that late rotation. They would have seen and heard those audio cues of the fire behind them on fuel depot, so that's going to be interesting. Huskers is going to have to be forced to move, and this is where the play is going to come in. We questioned, is this lineup of these young guns and Frex going to be able to perform when they come under pressure? This is great decision-making from them.
Yeah, and they very much do there as Rogue tried to make their way up. Huskers and Dropped already going to be going down. Only one member left. There it is. Easy cleanup there. And now Rogue is going to be no longer with us, but Frex and the boys are doing so well. The young guns there, complexity dropping in the middle of Capital City, and everybody trying to make that rotation over to that train station you were talking about before. We'll see how Frex and this squad, oh my goodness, ends up transitioning as we see that next circle actually accenting their positioning.
Yeah, you can see every single player and every single team at the moment is being forced to engage as we are seeing that circle move towards that little bridge.
Are you kidding me?
And up into the open. We also see a Kraber in play. It's Liquid who have managed to get a Kraber. And here come Sentinels as well. It's going to be Xenox managing to get up. Xenox has managed to get a good position here for that ult, protecting it from any potential fire, and that's what you want to focus on as a Watson, putting that ult down in a position where you're going to get the most use out of it. It's not going to be immediately destroyed and put you on the back foot.
And I really like the idea also setting it up in a position, and then more importantly, a time sensitivity to be able to confidently get the accelerant, just in case you do get forced out, you have the next play into that Watson generator, right? I think it's a very good decision-making coming out from them. But Tempo Storm, Pittsburgh Storm, and the fact that they did end up getting the res on the decop, but he barely able to make it out here, as it looks like it was Team Liquid unleashing the havoc there onto that roster.
And we see that golden scope on the G7 Scout as well, which is going to make things all the more interesting. You're going to be able to see any of these players who pop up. They're going to be illuminating red, and some more shots coming in with that Scout, managing to drop more shields. And we have seen Team Liquid hold down this position for pretty much the majority of these latter circles. The only issue is now when they have to rotate, can they time it right? And is there any real estate still available for them to push up onto?
Well, I know that there's definitely a Sentinels kind of waiting, ready to have something to say about Team Liquid in that rotation. But here we see Fnatic down one member. Spirit's going to be no longer with us, but they are in that low ground. This is what you were highlighting before. Can you get under the bridge? They managed to beat the Trolls on the bridge, but with only 2 of them, I don't know if it's enough.
Yeah, it's going to be the difficulty. If they get pushed, they're going to be at a numbers disadvantage. They're going to have their heads on a swivel and do what they can to defend what is a priceless position for them to be in. You can see they're kind of giving this one up. They've pushed out. They're trying to get some kills on the board. I don't mind this play.
But how did they get out for free? The fact that they didn't even take that much damage. Fnatic showing confidence here, but then Muffins ends up getting a rebuttal. Now we see a Shiny try and force it out, but it's not going to be enough. 5 squads now remain as we actually see members of Sentinels getting some damage, but Zombs ends up going down and the thirst comes through.
Yeah, look at those shots coming in as well, just to finish off that player. And now they're trying to take control here of that under the bridge area. Shots come in once again with the Eva 8, but Xenox is going to be taken down. And now we're going to go over to Frex and the boys, and they're doing a great job once again of managing to get into this endgame fight.
Yeah, they are holding their own now. 3 squads still remain. Frex able to get his battery off. Nathan may need a little bit of room, as actually he does complete a battery. He's going to be just fine. Team healed up. What can they do here? Now only 1 squad remains, actually. It's a 3 versus 3. This is Liquid up against Young Guns and Frex, and based on the names here, this is 2 qualifiers team. All the invited are out. It's qualies, boys.
This is the qualies, and they're coming to play here in North America. You can see the Gibby Dome's gone up. 3v3 situation. A couple of shots with that scout to drop some shields on the Gibby. A push out here from the Younglings and Frex, and this is what it all comes down to here. We're not even in that last second, and both teams are getting aggressive. A chunk with a Peacekeeper is going to take some damage.
That goes into the shield. That was an 80. One more, and he will be able to get the crack. But look at that. Nocturnal already goes down, and he gets the shot through. It should be enough here. Actually, Liquid, yeah, they do it. They have the opportunity, and they hold on.
Liquid managed to clutch it up at the end. A little bit of a scary moment there, as that Peacekeeper shot did not connect.
Yeah.
The Gibraltar managed to stay alive just long enough to cause a little bit of a ruckus, but I mean, the qualifying teams, they're here to play. They're just showing, like, what, yo, you're not inviting us? All right, we'll come and win games the hard way.
No, I think it's great in the fact that we were able to see them stand out, and I think these are, we were talking and highlighting some of the rosters on the qualified. These are some of the ones that we expected to stand out, so it's great to be able to see that. But to be honest, when we were to revisit that last couple of seconds before that battle went down, right before that Gibraltar push, 33 seconds on the circle closing, and when you ask yourself who has the positional advantage, it actually was on the other side of the table. I'm surprised that they got so hasty to be able to risk that positioning outward. I can't help but feel like it had to be the knock onto Nocturnal was enough for, like, let's go, let's push.
Yeah.
And great Peacekeeper play there onto the Gibraltar was enough to thwart it back.
Yeah, it was a clutch end in there from Team Liquid, and they managed to close it out. But I think the real story is, like we mentioned, the 2 qualifying teams, and we put a question to ourselves. We were like, okay, we've heard a lot about this lineup. We've heard a lot about Younglings and Frex. 2nd place in the first game. We were looking for their decisions, and were they going to be correct? Were they able to execute? Everything outside of that last battle, you have to say, big tick in the box.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. I walked in and was like, evidence says that they will fail. And they were like, joke's on you, Dread. We're going to go ahead and got to bring in the analyst test here, see how they felt about Young Guns and Frex, and along with, I feel like, some of the other rosters there, especially that of Team Liquid.
Yeah, is it Young Guns? I thought it was the Youngins.
The Youngins.
Who knows,
Youngins.
dued? At this point, yeah, it's the Youngins. You're right.
I think it's the Youngins and Frexes. I'm not. Is that one of the players for the team, or is that image stolen off the internet? Or?
We're going to have to assume stolen.
Bravo, you always expect the worst in people, buddy. Guys, fantastic casting. Yeah, that was an explosive finish. Liquid, was it Liquid White that almost pulled off an amazing clutch at the end, or one of the
Liquid Blue.
Liquid Blue. Yeah, guys, run me through your thoughts on what just transpired.
Okay, Brava's going to vouch for me here, but remember how I said I wanted to call out a player or a team when you were like, who should we look forward? And then I didn't want to curse it. I was going to talk about Team Liquid Blue.
Oh, sure. Here we go. You can't
When the game started, we sat down on the sofa, and I specifically said before anything happened that this is who I wanted to talk about.
I will be the first to not vouch for Glitter if I can. However, this time, she's right.
Look, guys, I'm not buying it, but look, we'll let Lauren have this one. Please continue. They did a fantastic job, just missing out at the end there.
Honestly, but this is just game 1. Talk about a strong start. They are a team that I have been saying for a while now has so much raw talent and so much promise. They just need to find the right way to harness it and be given the right opportunities in the game, and they will just show up when they need to. And I'm very, very happy that they did. But the Youngins and Frex was another team that we talked about and expected big things from. They were the top qualifier coming out of NA.
Yeah, and it's also, you look at both teams, right? Youngins and Frex is 24th at Poland. If you look at kind of where those players landed, reciprocity specifically for Frex. But also Team Liquid Blue, 45th in Poland. So it's just another example of a team that's in the qualifiers. They have a lot to prove, and I think that we're going to continue to see standout performances from teams that know that the placings that they got previously really didn't kind of set the tone for how they want to have their Apex careers go.
Were there any other points in the match that particularly stood out for either of you?
Do you know what I'm going to say?
I think I know, and I think it happened at Fuel Depot.
Okay, so there was a point that we both caught when we were watching where CLG pushed up on Rogue, and that did not go so well for them. And that's kind of a discussion that we've been trying to have as far as like the talent lineup goes about CLG.
Yeah, I think it points to the fact that CLG, first of all, I'm glad we're seeing CLG make bold pushes.
100%.
That's
100%.
Important. Because if we look at CLG's placing so far, right, they're always part of the conversation. However, 17th and 16th at X Games and Poland, respectively. So it begs the question, right, what is it going to take for them to really get into this top tier where they're a team that we can't ignore and that we expect to see in final zones and absolutely in the top 10. So I'm glad to see CLG making bold plays at times like that. However, I mean, Sweet really stepped up. 2 kills with the EVA, essentially in a scenario where I don't think he should have gotten them, and he's able to shut that push down. So on the other side, it's a great play from Rogue. They weren't able to get through the choke. That is a deadly choke.
That was a rough spot for them to be in.
Trying to come out of Depot. They were pushing on Youngins and the Frexes, who had high ground. They had the choke. It was not an easy push. So that was the end of Rogue's run in that game. However, I think definite bits of goodness from all those squads.
Absolutely.
And we just need to see CLG continue to be fierce in their decision making. And I think also, you know, a team like Rogue needs to make sure how do they avoid scenarios like that.
Guys, thank you so much. We are now ready for a break. Match 1 for NA goes to the Youngins and Frexes. Glitter, appreciate the input. Bravo. Is it Bravo? Because I've been saying Bravo.
Bravo's right.
Okay, perfect.
Don't question it.
Bravo's just like the nickname.
Okay,
you know,
I see.
They both work.
For a second there, when you call them Bravo, I was like, okay, have I been doing this wrong the whole time?
You've been doing great.
Thank you so much. And with that said, let's head to a break before we go into the second match for NA.